Hi folks, it's me again. I'm in the woods in eastern Iowa on the banks of the Mississippi River. Now why am I here? Well, I'm here to look at effigy mounds. We've covered a lot of the woodland peoples in previous episodes, the Hopewell, the Adena, and more. But these woodland peoples, who were probably related to them or to the Mississippians, were unique in that the mounds they chose to build were effigies. And in this area, in what is now Wisconsin and eastern Iowa, contains the most effigy mounds in all of the country. Amazing sculpted figures of animals such as panthers, bears, birds, abstract shapes, and the nation's only effigy mound of a humanoid figure. Now, who were these people? Why did they choose to build effigy mounds instead of your standard earthworks or platform mounds like we've seen before? And why did they choose this area, and only this area, for these effigies when so many mounds existed in the surrounding country that were not representational of creatures, man, or spirits? These are all questions that will not be answered in this episode because I'm no scholar, I'm no academic. I just like looking at mounds and the way it makes me feel. Join me, won't you?
Mounds, 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 mounds. My name's Corey and I'm running all around. I'm traveling in the country in search of burial mounds. Mysterious, they left a secret buried underground. But will we ever know the reason? Mounds, 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 mounds.
So if you can see in the distance behind me, following the ridgeline of this hill, we have a series of 20, 30 circular mounds, very small, very short, leading in a line all the way to the banks of the Mississippi, where we have burial mounds, Hopewellian, 1,500 years old, clay, mud, peat, leaves, shells from Florida, and more layered over time over the bodies of some important people who were wearing copper bracelets, copper breastplates, and more. What is a burial mound? Well, that is a robust question demanding the kind of answer which you, average internet viewer, doesn't have the kind of attention span that explanation allows. I mean, according to my analytics, I've already lost 80% of you after this first minute. So to you, the one encountering me during a random scroll and shit while hiding in the company restroom, trying to extract as many meager seconds of the experience of living this homogenized life for yourself as you can during this bathroom break from whatever soul-crushing job it is you've willingly shackled yourself to in exchange for a few meager coins and an excuse to wear that tweed suit, I've got to explain this to you as simply as I can. That is, if you haven't turned this off already. Here's some boobs to keep your attention a bit longer. That usually works. God, I hate myself. I hate that this is what my life is reduced to. Me being a crappy and underproduced YouTube channel vying for likes and shares from you, some adult-aged, shut-in twink who identifies as an anthropomorphic and neonatal unicorn emoji lazily side-eyeing me during your mining of the internet for content to share on Reddit in order to elevate your social status amongst your broader community of emotionally handicapped, translucent-skinned, masturbating legions occupying a sea of mothers' basements. God, I barely started this thing and I already want to kill myself. Firstly, we're looking at Hopewell burial mounds, so that is the style of burial mound we'll describe. And while I explain, I'm going to show some images from older texts and diagrams that were based on excavations of some Hopewell mounds. These days, excavating burial mounds in the United States is a controversial method that is generally frowned upon. The living descendants of these people, the modern Native American, wish for these burials to remain undisturbed, and they are more than justified in those wishes. But these excavations have been done already. The diagrams and photos exist, and I'm curious, so I'm going to use them as reference. That doesn't mean I'm justifying anyone's actions, and it doesn't mean I'm taking sides in any contemporary arguments or contemporary arrogance about colonialism and perceived misdeeds in recent history that we modern people should be blamed for by association, according to you who sits on the internet and doles out your fantastic judgment on me, the plebeian YouTube content creator. These are just the materials I have, so I'm going to use them. I've surely lost all of you viewers by now. Here's more boobs. Hopewell burial mounds contained anywhere from 1 to 100 people. These buried people were typically very important people. How do we know this? Because they would be buried with important goods. Imagine you're a Stone Age person and how important natural and fabricated resources are to you. Like, say, a shovel. Imagine how important a shovel would be to a Stone Age person who doesn't have a Menards or Home Depot to swing by and grab one, along with a 10-pound bag of breakfast cereal, an oil drum of cancer-causing weed killer, 2 gift cards to Applebee's, and a ramekin of dried horse semen. You say you haven't seen that for sale at Menards? It's my only reliable source for that shit, Chippy. See, a shovel is something important. I know that what's important for you is a like on Instagram or a defecation free of bilirubins, but for a Stone Age person, this is something they use every day and rely upon for survival. It's very important. It's a tool. It's a crafted and shaped tool that isn't exactly the easiest thing to come by because there's no metal or shopping malls, and you need a specific kind of stone to make it out of, and that stone is usually not endemic to the place you live in, so the stone is acquired by trade, and that stone can only be shaped into a shovel by only a few craftspeople in your tribe who have developed that specialized skill required to make one. I'm trying to impart to you how important a shovel is, okay? So Stone Age Sam needs this shovel bad. And this shovel ain't exactly easy to come by. But instead of keeping it for you or your family or your tribe, for you to use for your people's gain and survival, you bury this very important tool with your dead grandfather, sometimes hundreds of them, with the corpse of your dead grandfather deep in the mound or in the ground to never be used by or accessed by you or your tribe again. You've just taken a thing that is essential for your survival, a thing you put a lot of time and work into acquiring and using, into the earth, where it will never be used by you again. My only comparison for you, oh internet viewer, would be to imagine not saving any of the data from your smartphone onto any other computer or into the cloud and then burying it with all of your tens of thousands of oh-so-important selfies and the passwords to your Facebook and Instagram and your favorited TikToks and all the memes that perfectly explain your moods and sense of humor to your followers and all the kitten videos and all your favorite face filter settings alongside the deceased and fermenting body of your alcoholic aunt. Yeah, that thought's pretty devastating, isn't it? How would you survive even a day without that stuff? And on top of being buried with all sorts of important tools like shovels, fishing needles, and arrowheads, these very important people were also buried with very important trade goods from faraway places. These Wisconsin mounds here contain shells and shark teeth from Florida, rare stones and minerals from Arizona and Montana, and copper from Michigan, minerals from Utah, goods from very, very far away that were very hard to come by for the locals. Stuff that would have definitely served great purpose amongst the living, but was seen to be even more, far more important for the dead. But there are exceptions. Not all these buried people were the important people. In some cases, these people were buried alongside as human sacrifices. This was not a super common practice like it was, say, in Central America during the same time period, but it did happen a fair bit. If you died and a community felt it was needed to bury you with 12 other, at the time, say, living women who were quite important to the community, as the community was small and they needed these women to birth children and raise children and ensure your tribe's survival, then you were probably a pretty important person for them to kill those women and bury them with you. You might have even been regarded as a god on earth. Also, anytime you see a hippie meditating at some ancient site and talking about how spiritual the place is, ask them just how spiritual slavery, castration, and human sacrifice is. God, I hate the myth of the noble savage.
Okay, so important grave goods, human sacrifice, and important people. That's what we're seeing in a lot of these excavations. In addition, we can see a planned layout and intelligent design. There was a varying usage of materials, different types and different colors of earth: clay, dirt, stone, peat, moss, wood, all laid out in a delicate parfait. In some cases, this was done all at once in one construction, and in some cases, this was done over time, over generations. In the case of some Hopewell burial mounds in my hometown of Grand Rapids, Michigan, the mounds that inspired my interest in topics such as these, in addition to adding layers of earth over time, they also added new burials over time. Sometimes these mounds were reserved for one person, and sometimes they were like our community graveyards of today, more and more burials being added to the mound over the years for hundreds of years, and the mound growing accordingly larger over that time. Fun anecdote, a friend of mine was tasked with repatriating and reburying excavated remains from mid-1800s digs of some of those Grand Rapids mounds, as rights to the mounds were being restored to local tribes, and the local tribes wanted the remains reburied. These bones had been sitting in boxes for almost 100 years, mislabeled or unlabeled and stashed away in piles and forgotten. So as he worked with the bones, he said that while sleeping at night, he would have dreams of adults and children telling him where the bones should go. He dreamed of a child saying that he'd put her leg bones with the wrong torso, of a woman telling him her ribs were still missing, and he reordered those human remains as according to the instructions given to him in dreams. And now he sleeps at peace. Anywho, as the Wisconsin Hopewell burial mounds were added to over time, that meant these places served as community centers, places that generations of Hopewell returned to over hundreds of years of nomadic travel to carry out their burial traditions. And as we know from our own experience returning to the same place year after year, like our annual pilgrimages to Disneyland or Dave's Grease Shack for our annual allotment of horse tallow, we can surmise that these burial grounds had all the trappings of gathering spaces. They were probably places of ceremony, ritual, festival, feasting, singing, dancing, storytelling, and more. Imagine that these simple and yet perfectly effective, exquisitely designed plots of earth made of nothing but the materials abundantly at hand could serve as so much and in so many ways to the community. Hills of earth. And us? We need Target and Walmart. We can't enjoy a hill, sit on a hill and tell stories and reflect on our ancestors and life and all the joy and pain that comes with it. We need malls and theme parks and sports arenas and to dress up in weird caricatured costumes loosely based on how these ancients dressed while spinning fire poi as we listen to blast beats and EDM while hopped up on OxyContin and MMDA at events we pay 6 months' wage to attend just for a weekend, if we aren't already a trust fund baby who does this as a lifestyle and with dad's oil money, or thanks to the patronage of our OnlyFans subscribers. What a world it is that we have built on these people's ashes and their hills.
Behind me, our first effigy mound. Little bear mound in the shape of a little bear. Now, of course, we must ask ourselves why effigy mounds, because just like, let's say, the Nazca lines in Peru, these shapes are only readable from the air. This looks like nothing more than what? A series of lumps. And just look behind me. They go on forever and ever and ever. Just.
And what is an effigy mound? Well, they were burial mounds like those made by the neighboring Hopewell, but they were constructed in the shape of animals, symbols, or humans. They were representational. And although they were being made at the same time as the Hopewell burial mounds I explained earlier, the way they differed is that these effigy mounds only ever contain 1 to 3 people, often buried at different time periods, and that they never contain grave goods. There were never any items contained in the effigy mounds other than the people themselves. So these people, The effigy mound builders seem to have a more egalitarian view of humanity, whereas the surrounding Hopewell seemed to think that a person needed to take goods and other people with them into the afterlife. These effigy mound builders didn't think any of that stuff was necessary. They thought those goods were best used by the living. This is an important distinction in understanding who these effigy mound builders were. But they took their symbology seriously, far more seriously than the Hopewell and their conical burials, because these people buried their dead inside of symbols representing bears, panthers, lizards, and eagles. What the hell does that mean? To me, it means that these people were abstract thinkers, that they were artists, that they had a direct connection to the spirit world, and the vessel that took the dead into the afterlife was an important thing. They didn't need to take goods from this earth with them to the spirit world, but the vessel that carried them did need significance. And this style of thinking, this very progressive and spiritual style of abstract thinking, happened in an area of the world that no one in their right mind would think of today as a place of artists, spiritualists, and intellectuals. Wisconsin. That's right, folks. The state, which is now known only for the fact that it contains 41 of the top 50 drunkest and most alcoholic counties in the whole of the United States of America, of a place that makes most of our mainstream and easily palatable, inoffensive and barely flavored cheeses, a place where people get into violent fights over football, a place where teenagers cross state lines to legally murder protesters with easily obtained automatic weapons, is also pretty much the only place on the earth with effigy mounds. There are a few here and there in the Northeast and the Southeast, but nothing like the tens of thousands we find here. These people who made complex burials containing symbology of the eagle, panther, and bear buried amongst an occupying nation who now regard those same symbols as logos for sports teams and nothing more.
So this very small one is probably one you'll be able to make out. If you see over my shoulder, distinctly you see two sets of legs and a round head at the tip. This is a small effigy mound of a bear. Bears. Well, what do we know about bears? Well, they're indiscriminate eaters. That's what they are to me, at least. They're omnivores. They see no difference between plant, animal, mineral, vegetable. It's all food to them. Why me, these leaves, those berries, could all be a meal for a bear that right now is lurking in these woods and watching me. But they are objective, indiscriminate eaters that see all things as equals in their eyes, a potential meal. Not stalking and hunting predators, they simply reach out, grab what they want, and take it. And just like the indigenous peoples, their habitat is dwindling as more and more Americans take up their land to build 7-Eleven, Quick Stops, Targets, and Five Guys burger companies.
Nobody likes the polar bear. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Everybody fears the grizzly bear. They point and stare. They point and stare. Nobody out there to cuddle me. No one to brush my hair. I'm just a lonely teddy bear. Nobody cares. These paws were made for hugging, and this snout was made for kissing you. But since Werner Herzog made Grizzly Man, they lock up their trash cans, hide all their honey jars, bury all their berries and plants off their backyards. No more sweeping pools, time for guns and schools. No more toilet paper ads.
Moriah during the time of King Herod, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt, and Assyria the work of my hands, and Israel my inheritance." A warrior riding his chariot pulled by a single horse, an Egyptian queen.
And you will honor me.
The Shadewald Mound group, a wonderfully preserved group of mounds standing atop a hill here in Wisconsin near the Mississippi River. And this is one we'll get a chance to take a look at from the air because I can take the drone up. And it begets the question, why build these things that could only be seen from the sky?
Shadewald mounds are an incredibly preserved set of effigy mounds built on an embankment. Their preservation thanks in part to an Iowan farmer named Frank Shadewald, who purchased the land with the intent of keeping this special and unique spot out of the hands of developers who would rather use any spare bit of land in Iowa for the construction of a truck stop. Literally, Iowa loves and wants truck stops. They think they're the most fascinating things in the world. Not a painting by Gauguin or Picasso and all of their expressive and unquantifiable passion and perplexity. Not to sit enwrapped in edge-of-the-seat attention at a live Philharmonic performance of Philip Glass's hypnotic and soothing masterpiece Koyaanisqatsi. Not to bask in awe and wonder at the magic contained in an innocent and newborn child's smile at their first glance and imprinting upon their mother's rosy and childbirth fatigued face. No. To the tow-headed Iowan, it is the truck stop which sits at the tippiest top of the magnificence pyramid. They support truck stops to such an extent that their corn-laden state is, no joke, home to the largest truck stop in the world. People, American tourists, drive from all over our nation in a pilgrimage to see this place firsthand, to be enthralled by this epically sized and swollen convenience store bursting at the seams with its excess of ooey-gooey Cinnabons and gut-busting microwave-heated trucker burritos of the sort one can only find here or on commissary day in the vending machine at the local deadbeat dad behind on his child support minimum security prison. To marvel at its football field-length halls of bathroom stalls, each stall containing a rosaceaed and mustachioed trucker resplendent in plaid shirt and John Deere cap, scream-shitting out a mix of his last 3 nights' delight of fried and fast food that is mixed with broken bones not spat out during an energetic inhale of the entire bagged contents of Big Buck Willie's deep-fried fuck sticks with a side of essayed 5W30, along with the necrotized and shedding portions of his pancreas and liver. If you think I'm exaggerating the kind of love this place is the recipient of the kind of love you or I wish and pray to experience just once and unconditionally from that rare 1 in 10,000 soft-skinned or fair-haired maiden who is free of trauma, daddy issues, dependence on their OnlyFans page for basic street-level income, or debilitating mental illness in our miserable lives, just look at this recent review from their website. Anywho, the effigy mound builders like the ones here at Shadewald represent just a speck on the timeline of mound building cultures. While the broader mound building cultures of the United States thrived and sculpted the land of the Americas for 2,000 to 3,000 years, their mounds being found in just about every corner of this country, the effigy mound builders survived and practiced their lifestyle for only about 400 years and kept this practice to this lone and unique part of the continent. Effigy mounds are unique to an area called the driftless, which encompasses southern Wisconsin as well as parts of Iowa and Minnesota. It is called the driftless because it was not covered by glaciers during the last ice age. No glaciers moved through the area and thusly did not affect the shape of the land, did not leave any sedimentary or mineral deposits, and did not contribute to lakes or rivers. This bore some kind of unknown significance to the people who immigrated to this area and decided it was a place deserving of effigy mounds. And the effigy mound builders were rather isolated, not geographically, but in that their culture was isolated. The practice of building effigy mounds didn't influence other cultures to adopt the same practice. All of the surrounding peoples chose to build conical burial mounds and ridgeline earthworks instead of effigy mounds. And they didn't trade abundantly with any of those other cultures of the area like the other contemporary Hopewell groups of the time did. Whereas burials of the Ohio Hopewell contained trade goods from Florida, Arizona, Michigan, and more, the effigy mound builders almost exclusively relied on goods acquired only from the driftless area and nowhere else. They were an insular and isolated culture. One could surmise they were segregationists of their day, shunning the material resources that dominated trade routes and refusing to adopt the spiritual and religious practice of the contemporary peoples living all around them. Kind of like how we have isolationist groups on American soil today, like the Amish, polygamous Mormons, or Juggalos.
Now, most of these effigies, and certainly this one, are built atop a very tall hill. Not low on the ground where one could stand on top of a hill and look down upon and see the shapes, but no. These mounds are built atop the highest point in the area, depicting an eagle and a bear. Who was meant to see this? Well, we're in a semi-affluent suburb nestled between a lake and a golf course, so you know what that means. We're on stolen Native American land. These are the Koshkonong Mounds. Right behind me is what they call the turtle or lizard. They're not quite sure, but it is an effigy mound. It's one of 40 or 50 effigy mounds in this area. And I gotta say, I'm impressed with the size of all these things that I've seen. Now, some of these sites I've been at and the locals have said, "Where are the mounds?" And I know they're hard to read because the slopes are quite gentle. But it's understandable considering these things are 1,000 to 2,000 years old. They're going to erode quite a bit. But they are all long. Very, very long. This lizard mound I'm walking next to is over 150 feet long. Which again, really is only going to make something like this readable from the sky. Well, the weather's gone to shit, and so has my mood. We're at Lizard Mound Park, north of Milwaukee. Since we won't be able to get up into the air due to the rain and look at the many amazing effigy mounds here of eagles, panthers, and lizards, let's recap, shall we? Remember, this is a hunter-gatherer society that preceded what we know as the Native American. The tribes that existed when colonialists first arrived here were the descendants of these disappeared people. And what they were was part of a different kind of functioning society. Hunter-gatherers that one could say perhaps chose to remain hunter-gatherers, as that lifestyle was unchanged for nearly 10,000 years. A migratory people who followed the patterns of the buffalo seasons, who cultivated a few crops, and who made it all over this continent. And we know this because of the existence of trade. All of these sites we've covered in all of these episodes, you find copper from Michigan, shells from the southeast coast, obsidian and jade from the southwest. What can I tell you about the mounds at Lizard Mound State Park? Next to nothing, because there's not much information readily accessible. All I can tell you is that this is one of the best and biggest collections of still preserved effigy mounds in the world. And that these people occupied this area from around 1000 AD to 1500 AD. These are burial mounds. Bodies were interred in pits in the ground, atop which were crafted these amazing effigy mounds. This was a society, a functioning society with a large population that touched every square inch of this country before we arrived. Oh man, and look at this shit. Look at that. Do you see the ridge mound behind me? The conical mound. And what are the repetitive motifs we see? Well, here we see panthers, bears, eagles, and lizards. All important symbology that informed their way of life. And this symbology must have had relevance to a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. It must have informed them on the changing of the seasons, how to find food, how to survive, how to find resource. This was all code informing them of how to live and where to go. Memories, static memories in sacred spaces, instructing these peoples on how to sustain and maintain their way of life for thousands upon thousands of years. Look, here's another one. Little tiny panther mound. All I know is this is a stunningly preserved site. Just absolutely exciting place. And it just makes me crazy that so few people know about this stuff. When you think of, I need to go to Greece to see the ruins, or I need to go to Egypt to see ruins, or I need to go to Mexico to see ruins. And it's like, they're everywhere on this continent too. They're just not made out of stone, but they're everywhere. And it signifies just as rich a history as those other ruins do as well. We have so much romanticism about Rome and Greece and Egypt and all those places. Well, all those stories happened here too. Kings and queens, magic, elders, warriors, struggles, everything. All those stories happened here. They just told them in a different way here. But you can still listen and hear them. And now let's take a little diversion. Escape from the lush greenery of the Midwest and its mound building peoples. West to the mountain states. We find ourselves outside of Thermopolis, Wyoming, looking at petroglyphs. What's so amazing about humanity is the fact that it's been everywhere. It's already been everywhere, but long before we had our perverted desire to stick a flag in everything and everywhere, long before all that, people had already been to all these places. There's not a mountain that we haven't conquered that someone hasn't been to before, an ocean that someone hasn't already crossed, and they did it pretty much in their bare feet and with wooden spears with stone tips. And now here in this very unforgiving landscape, people have been coming for 10,000 years and carving art into its walls.
What is a Dinwoody petroglyph? Well, they are a certain style of petroglyph we only see prevalent in the area we now know as Wyoming. It is a certain style of petroglyph that is chiseled with a tool, kind of like a peg and awl, a hammer pounding a small cylindrical stone so as to chip out small circular chunks off the surface of a stone wall, kind of like the pen and ink method of stippling. Oftentimes, they would also be painted over. They would paint over the stippling. Compared to other styles of petroglyphs of the mountain states in the Southwest, this is a far more sophisticated method of crafting and accounts for why they have stayed so well preserved. These Dinwoody folks were essentially the master craftspeople of the petroglyph world. Dinwoody petroglyphs are divided into 4 categories, types 1 through 4, with type 1 being the oldest and type 4 being the youngest. Dating across these types is varied, but type 1 could be as old as 10,000 years old, and type 4 at 1,000 years. And over time and across types, what we see is the images first being solely of the animals they hunted, with the exception of the bison for some reason, which they didn't draw at all, and with later styles adding humans in symbology, and then even later styles adding quite abstract symbology and depictions of what must be spirits or deities. This is a chart in stone of the development of abstract thought in the human mind. First, the only focus was the animals upon which they depended for survival, and then over time and over a period where getting resources must have been getting easier and easier and more specialized and more free time was being had to pursue other interesting concepts, ideas of the spirit and human beings' place in the world started to become just as important to them, if not more important than those animals they hunted. If my life were charted in petroglyphs, it would just be boobs. My earliest drawings were of boobs, and all I draw today are boobs. They account for the deepest extent of my shallow thinking and hopefully will entrance and enchant our future alien archaeologists of the next millennia.
And now we know very, very little of what this art means and who made it, because very, very little research has been done into the people who inhabited the Americas before white people arrived. Now, admittedly, it's also extremely hard to decipher anything that's made on rock by a culture that's long, long gone. But it does make me think of a recent stop I made in South Dakota on the way out here, where I learned about the Lakota winter count, where they use symbology at the end of each year to note the passing of a year and the history of a year. And basically, at the end of each year, I heard a rattlesnake. At the end of each year, their calendar keeper would make one symbol to sum up that whole year, the whole community's experience of the year. Maybe it was a symbol of a star to denote a comet passing by, or a horse because it was a good year for horses, or maybe the passing of an important individual. But it was one image summing up a community. It was not a personal image, it was a community image. Now, our images are for our community, for ourselves. We draw pictures and put them up on Instagram for a like, or maybe, if we're lucky, to sell. But really, they're meaningless beyond our own imagination. And certainly, these images were representative of the communities that lived here. So that meant the community would come here, return here, and obviously did, because some of these petroglyphs are as old as 10,000 years old, and some are only a few hundred years old. So obviously they came here over and over again to look at these images, to reflect and learn from their history, which is something we have forgotten how to do, because unlike them, we don't have something called curiosity that's dead within us. But some kind of curiosity kept them braving this inhospitable landscape. I mean, imagine it. You're using stone-pointed spears, wooden staffs, you're fighting against nature to survive. Yet it was important to come here, to this place, this dry, hot as hell, dusty place where barely anything grows, year after year for 10,000 years, and write down messages that we don't know how to decipher. We see representations of typical creatures of the landscape: elk, antelope, rabbits, turtles, bears, and strange representations of human beings. Okay, it's windy as hell, and it's probably going to wreak havoc on the microphone, and the audio is going to be terrible, but we're going to shoot this anyway, because what can you do when you're self-funding, self-producing, self-everything, your own damn show that only is for your own self-interest? Well, we're here in Castle Gardens, Wyoming, a beautiful, picturesque valley in the middle of fucking nowhere. Now, you folks who have been watching my other episodes know that we've been focusing on cultures that existed, that ruled the Americas from about 2,000, 1,000 years ago. And here in this spot that we're at, it's the stomping grounds of a mysterious, unknown, and forgotten culture who lived here around that same time. And why did they come to this space? Why did they come to this area? Well, it was to draw pictures on its fantastic cliff faces. These people are the ancestors of the tribal cultures we now know as the Shoshone, a group of people who dominated these very, very difficult terrains and thrived here and would still be living here today had we not basically packed them into buses and got them the hell out of here when we turned the area just west of here into Yellowstone National Park. And their ancestors came here to leave inscriptions on these white rock faces. A lot of circular formations that we can only best guess are shields, decorated drawings of shields. We see drawings of warriors and hunters, antelope and bison, and many strange geometrical patterns, cross-hatch patterns, and weird figures with animal heads. But what greatly outnumbers their art is the abundant graffiti left here by white man. Now, I feel very conflicted about stuff like this because, in a way, it is just another addition to the archaeological record preserved here forever in history. But it's also a very foolish interpretation of the rock art for other people to come here and see this ceremonial, spiritual, religious iconography and then feel so moved as to write their own name on the wall next to it. It really says something when you're at an ancient, obviously very important site like this with bewildering rock art scrawled upon the walls from 1,000 years ago, and everywhere you go, signs up begging you to preserve this space and respect this space, but they still have to put up fences around the pictographs. And even with all those signs, and the fact that it takes like 2 hours of driving through the middle of nowhere to get here, this isn't someplace that you can just pop in on and check out. I mean, you have to really work to get here. And that someone would do all that work to get here and see all the signs saying, please respect this space. And they still want to write, Moose was here 2020 on the rocks next to an ancient pictograph of a shield or a bison-headed warrior. Let's go back a little bit further. Let's go to before the time of these works of prehistoric humans. Let's go deeper into our insignificance. Let's go past our postmodern blather and our ideological judgments of relative truths. Let's look at real truth. What's real truth? I'll last maybe 2 days out here if I'm lucky before I succumb. What's real truth? This heat, this dust, this vast nothingness, and the creatures that walked here hundreds of millions of years ago. I know you're all online blathering and arguing about your rights and your needs and your wants and whether or not you have a right to enter into this bathroom or that bathroom, or whether or not you have a right to carry your AK-47 into a Petco. Well, all of that is absolutely nothing. That is not impactful. That is no voice. That is no mission. That is no statement. Because here, some creatures walking along a shoreline, probably to, who knows, maybe to take a shit or eat an apple. The earth respected that movement so much that it saw fit to preserve their footsteps for 250 million years. I'm standing on the shores of the Sundance Sea, ground pockmarked with the footprints of hundreds of Jurassic era dinosaurs. Their signatures left on a muddy shore is now as hard as concrete. These footprints that have lasted far longer than your terabytes upon terabytes of selfies ever will.
Saving all my dreams, making all my memories. Saving all my dreams, making all my memories of you, my baby blue. It's always you. I dream of you. You're making all my dreams come true. Saving all my memories, all my dreams come true. Making all my memories of you. It's all so real. I'm saving you. It's making all my dreams, saving up my memories, making all my dreams, saving up my memories, making all my
I am very excited, also very confused. I am very elated. I'm also very sad. Why is that? Because I'm standing in front of Man Mound, the only effigy mound in the shape of a man in the world. Nearly 200 feet long. It's a humanoid figure with a rather unusual head. And a design similar to some depictions I've seen before somewhere else in this episode. It is an amazing and also frustrating place because, given its uniqueness, one would think there would be a profound amount of respect for the area. Well, we destroyed it. We put a road right through it. But hey, we painted on the road where the legs were. And, you know, this is a rural area. I'm no urban planner. We're in the middle of pasture next to a cornfield. I feel like they could have diverted the road slightly, just made a slight curve around the site, but that's neither here nor there. Just another perplexing piece of human history here on the North American continent that is virtually unknown, because for us Americans, history stops with the founding of our nation. But this country's history goes way farther back than that. And all we have left of them, all we have left of that history, the only signs of that history we have, are these mysterious sites, barely perceptible from the ground, really only understood from the air. And why would you build a 200-foot man with a ox head or a split open head here, pointing at the sky, similar to the Nazca lines, the Uffington horse, the Wiltshire man, and Blythe intaglios? What was the significance? And also, does it happen to you where wherever you go, weirdos just find you? because I'm in the middle of rural Wisconsin, middle of fucking nowhere, and at this like little Man Mound park that has no visitors. But that whole time I filmed that segment, of course, that you've seen him before. The guy in the minivan who's got his geriatric mother in the passenger seat drives by. You know, she's just completely out of it. He pulls up in the minivan and opens the door, and she just sits there. She's drooling on her feet, and then he just sits on a bench to watch me film my little segment. And then just as I'm wrapping up, he gets in the van and drives off with the mother. He never looked at the mound or any of that sort. He just saw that a guy was doing something, and he had to just be near that guy just to make sure that I knew he was around, that he smoked cigarettes, and that he had a mother with Alzheimer's who was dying in the passenger seat of his 2001 Honda Odyssey minivan. And now, just miles away from Man Mound, we find ourselves at the Wisconsin Dells, our ceremonial gathering spaces. Now, we have different uses for ours, whereas the mounds that we're looking at were places of spiritual importance where people would come from all over to travel, commiserate, meet, speak, exchange ideas, and trade goods. We come here to blow our money on meaningless bullshit. How long will this place last? And when it does disappear, what will the archaeologists say about us? Oh, look, this is where they would zip line. Oh, there's a Ripley's Believe It or Not museum. How exciting. You know, I live in a neighborhood full of drug dealers, addicts, gangbangers, and more.
In here.
This is a lady vomiting in my doorway. But I feel way more worried that I'm going to get shot carrying around a camera filming in the suburbs than I do in my own violent home. Why am I here? We're going to look at an intaglio nestled between signs proclaiming allegiance to Joe Biden and Donald Trump is the panther intaglio. An intaglio is a reverse mound. This is a depression in the earth in the shape of those same panther mounds. Why did the mound builders make intaglios? Why were they so rare? I don't know. My feeling is perhaps it was filled with water. Imagine a reflecting pool in the shape of a panther. It'd be pretty aesthetically pleasing. I guess in what could be called my act of greatest and sheerest stupidity, I have embarked on a quest in a basically nature reserve with no trails, no paths, no nothing to show you what it's like when mounds are not disturbed ever. This is the Cranberry Creek Mound Group. They've never been excavated. This land has never been cultivated or plowed by white settlers. So this area is what, well, I mean, the country would look like probably if we hadn't come around. And you can barely discern, but they're all around me. They're weathered away, overgrown. See one right here. I'm spooked on a lot of levels for a lot of different reasons. So yeah, like right there, it's one right in front of me, and I really don't want to walk over it. I mean, that. So you see another one right behind me. hard to read, I know, on camera. But the slope of the overgrowth over this eroded 2,000-year-old burial mound. Good Lord, they are everywhere. I'm just gonna take a peek in the woods here. Yeah, it's impossible to tell. It's just too overgrown in here. So we see behind me on the right another mound, and just as a point of interest, near it, see this blue-tipped grass here. Well, this is prairie grass that once covered pretty much all of the central plains that are still around, but not nearly as abundant. It's long-lived and strong because its root system goes 6 to 10 feet deep. And this was the grass that covered the plains upon which millions of bison fed. Whom these hunter-gatherers followed. High Cliff State Park, nestled in between Lake Winnebago and a utterly disgusting subdivision of cookie cutter houses and taupe, clay, and granite. But we do have this beautiful and wonderfully preserved site. These effigy mound builders tended to build their mounds on the edges of bluffs overlooking water. Now, water was definitely important to them, probably as a source of food, drinking water, and travel. But surely they selected these places for their beauty as well, just as we would. And you need to think about the lifestyle of hunter-gatherer, always on the move, fighting for survival. These were places that they visited maybe once or twice a year. So surely they were happy places, places they were happy to see, happy to visit, and significant places because this is where they buried their dead. They would dig holes in the ground where they would bury the remains of their elders and then build these effigy mounds over them. Perhaps those shapes signified the name of their clan or tribal affiliation. And over time, more and more burials meant larger mound sites. So surely these were happy places, places of reunions, places of conversation, places to trade goods, and places just to catch up. And really knowing that these people really lived half in the spirit world and half outside of the spirit world, I don't think it's too far a stretch of the imagination to think that this is also where they communed with spirits. And I really mean directly communicated with spirits, as in hung out with them as they took shape of some kind or made their presence known in some kind of way. Us white Americans are on the end of a 1,000-year journey of material obsession, an obsession with gain, power, and posterity. And we're too far removed from the spirit world to truly understand it and what part it plays in these places. These people had no written language. They had oral tradition. They were storytellers. They kept their memories alive, their respect for their ancestors alive through words, through tales. And it's not too far to guess that these places were places of memory, that these mounds, these areas were imbued with powers of stories, to such a degree that they could walk here and live in those stories, even communicate with them, reflect upon them, learn from them, and even tell them what's going on today. And it is a testament to those sites' power, their longevity, that they would survive despite our best efforts to erase them from the face of this continent. There is surely something there that keeps them around, surely something that can be learned from them. Because Coincidentally enough, at this very site, our own ruins lie here, barely 100 years old, yet crumbling and almost forgotten. And it's not surprising, because what memory, what power is there in an old limestone kiln? A temple built to nothing but the destruction of the land and the stealing of its resources. If I came here, what stories would I exchange with the next generation? What would I tell my children? Oh, this factory is where we made concrete to build the walls of the rooms in our homes that we hide ourselves in and loathe ourselves in.
Making it on our own, balancing kids, working home. We'll make it if we try. As long as I've got you by my side, it's tough. It can be a lot. You don't know if you're good or not. The world, it can seem so insane. It can make no sense. It can be a pain. But we're making it on our own, just you and I.
We're at Aztlan State Park in Wisconsin. So named because in the 1800s, the local amateur archaeologists, depressingly, understandably, thought that this was an Aztec site due to its stepped pyramidal mounds. Racism was prevalent in the day, and it was just not believed that Native Americans, who were thought of as savages, could have possibly built such a well thought out and planned city. And it is a well thought out and planned city, and it's built by the Mississippians. This is the last of the mound building peoples, whereas the Hopewell and other woodland peoples that we've been looking at the structures of were hunter-gatherer, or a mix of hunter-gatherer and agricultural. These folks were sedentary. They had agriculture, they stayed in one place, and they built cities.
Aztlan is a city. If there's one thing I want this little self-indulgent web series to achieve, is to get just a few people to stop thinking of American history and so-called modern society, starting with the arrival of Columbus. Well, to get that, and to also get my deserved share of that large pool of sex-addicted bikini babes looking to give head to a horse-faced social reject with a YouTube channel and obsession for piles of dirt. There were many cities, many cities on North American soil long before we people who call ourselves Americans arrived. Aztlan here was a walled and permanent settlement. They grew corn, beans, and squash. They relied heavily on the river for fishing, and they hunted deer, just like you camouflage-wearing towheads with your tactical gear do today. Within the walls of the city, they lived in houses, just like you or I. They lived in houses, not teepees, houses, you fucking idiots who instantly think of teepees when you think of the Native American. The teepee, which is in fact a tent that was used pretty much only by the nomadic Native Americans of the Great Plains and not by the other 90% of the people dwelling upon this continent. Dear fair viewer, who is most likely either adhering to one of two mindsets when it comes to concepts of the ancient American, categorizing them as either as nomadic plains-dwelling person who lived in a teepee and sent up smoke signals, meaning you're age 45 or older, or as a person who lived in the desert and built dream catchers and did peyote to talk to lizard men, which means you're under 40 or a saggy-breasted lesbian in their 60s. The walled city of Aztlan contained mounds of varying importance and usage. Some were burial mounds containing 10 to 20 important individuals. The platform mounds were flat-topped and had wooden structures built on top of them. Probably temples or places of residence of priests or chieftains. Aztlan also contains a row of mysterious mounds which began as a row of single posts of wood which were erected, then burned, and then buried under a mound. Perhaps they were some kind of monument to a harvest year or a chief, perhaps carved like stele or a totem pole. Who knows? We killed their ancestors and their stories died with them. And Aztlan also contains the Princess Mound, a mound containing a single burial of a young woman and over 20,000 jewelry beads. This was a city, and though its story is lost to the sands of time, it is still more intriguing and mysterious than other nearby Wisconsin communities like Milwaukee or Madison. Pabst and pseudo-intellectualism mixed with contemporary arrogance and shit cheese, that's all we get from those two worthless burgs.
It's really an amazing site, rich in history, because people occupied this area for nearly 10,000 years. And it's just really amazing what we see in the archaeological record, because it shows that when the Mississippians arrived and started with their urban planning and building a city, they still coexisted with the earlier woodland people who were building the conical mounds. Archaeological record shows that they both occupied this site at the same time, very similar to how we have like Amish living side by side with more modern peoples, or similar to the contrast between, you know, chic urban city centers and rural areas. Eventually, though, the Mississippians won out, and their way of life was adopted by all the peoples who lived here. Just imagine that. There were cities on this continent before we arrived. This is a giant settlement that claimed allegiance to the massive city south of here, of Cahokia. Many residents who lived here actually were from there. We can tell from the archaeological evidence. And they regularly traded with the site. And it's remarkably well preserved, containing a lot of really interesting elements that show us what life was like during this time period. There are all sorts of interesting features that are still preserved on this site. In the river whose banks upon which the city was built are still the remnants of dams, small stone structures that would funnel fish in certain directions and trap them and make them easier to fish. The floor plans of their houses, their circular and rectangular homes still survive. All sorts of interesting features that are endemic to a sedentary culture, a city building culture, the most noticeable of which is the giant walls that ran around the city. These are a recreation, but they're based on the post holes that were excavated during archaeological investigations. Giant wall surrounded the whole city. It wasn't just wood, it was covered in clay and grass and hide, so it was really a strong, thick wall. Contained regular watchtowers, other defensive features, and secret entrances through which the residents could come and go. And those are the trappings of sedentary lifestyle. Whereas before, the woodland peoples were nomadic hunter-gatherers, competing with the land and with nature for survival and banding together in cooperation. When you have a sedentary lifestyle, people in one place, people fostering a surplus of resources, means they need to protect those resources. So they build walls around their city to protect themselves from other competing towns. So that means you have warfare, and we certainly had it here. There are numerous burn pits full of human remains, which suggest conflict, most likely ritual sacrifice of captured warriors from rival tribes. And really, we just see all this trappings of modern society starting to form here. A ruling class living atop the giant platform mound, a warrior class defending the city, and then makers of pottery, makers of homes, preparers of food, so on and so forth. Yeah, and with a sedentary lifestyle, you eventually go batshit crazy. You have deification of leaders, ritual sacrifice, cannibalism, and all sorts of other stuff. This is pretty much the end of the line for the mound building cultures of this area. It lasted for nearly 3,000 years, starting out as hunter-gatherers, building conical mounds, then effigy mounds, and then founding cities, stunning cities, with platform mounds, walls, burial mounds, and more. And then, inexplicably, long before our arrival, they disappeared. It's hard to know why. One can conjecture. The collapse of a civilization is usually predicated by a mix of climate change, dwindling resource, and political strife in the ruling class. And there is evidence of all those things here. And man, climate change, dwindling resources, political strife, sure does sound familiar, doesn't it? I wonder how long it is before the Trumpian MAGA cults start resorting to ritual sacrifice and cannibalism. I'm in yet another affluent suburb, in which is nestled another effigy mound preserve. And this, what you see around me, is what the mound builders intended. They knew that eventually these areas would become overgrown and reclaimed, go back to nature. Though they are not our ancestors, this history is our history and can inform the present if we would just pay attention to it. Modern American culture isn't one of respecting ancestors. We look at ancestors as commodities. The instant grandma or grandpa dies, we just start fighting about who gets their stuff. But in these times of toil, trouble, conflict, and bullshit disagreement, we could look to the fact that a society lasted here for a very, very long time. And to honor these places and preserve them is a way to show respect. It'll never happen, but I myself would love to see all the people who want to throw a brick through a 7-Eleven to come to these kinds of places and gain perspective, learn from history. People were here before us. It didn't start in 1492 when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. And that history, it's not a narrative we pick from to learn from. It's not a story that informs us. That history is a sense of respect. That people were here, that they struggled, that they made it work, and they did that for us. They prepared this place for us. And the way to respect them, the way to have our present informed by their history, is just shut the fuck up, stop fighting, and start getting to work.
There's still so much that we don't know about the people from long ago. They left their buildings and they left their roads. Where did they go? They conquered mountains and they crossed the seas. They left a mark on all humanity. Progenitors of mystery, who could they be? Deserts and jungles their homes. They built monuments made of stone. I think about them when I am alone. They had knowledge of planets and stars. Their technology was better than ours. They didn't have any use for cars, but they traveled far. With forgotten skills, they made pyramids bigger than hills. They moved stones with sheer force of will. They also killed. Masters of architecture and art, also masters at ripping out hearts. How could they tear civilizations apart when they loved art? Their memory has faded on. All I know about them's in this song, and it ain't long. Who were they built in the center of what is now my town. Gobekli Tepe, Uxmal, the Great Serpent Mound, Kerala, Palenque, Stonehenge, Chichen Itza.